Hi, I'm Mike from 1A Auto. We've been selling auto parts for over 30 years. We're dedicated to delivering quality auto parts, expert customer service, fast and free shipping, all backed by our 100% satisfaction guarantee. So visit us at 1aauto.com, your trusted source for quality auto parts.
In this video, we're going to be working with our 2006 Chrysler 300. We're going to show you how to remove and replace the vehicle's steering rack or inner tie rod boot. This is the billow that keeps dust and debris from getting into the grease on your tie rod, as well as the grease on the outer portion of your steering rack. If you like this video, please click subscribe. We have a ton more information on this and many other vehicles. And if you ever need parts for your car, you can follow the link down in the description over to 1aauto.com. Here are the items you'll need for this repair. Using a 21mm socket and a breaker bar, loosen all of your lug nuts about one turn. Raise and support your vehicle. We're using a lift to make it easier to show you what's going on, but this job can easily be done at home with a jack and jack stands. Remove your lug nuts the rest of the way by hand. Remove your wheel and tire. Using a 24mm wrench, and we've soaked both our jam nut and the nut on the end of the tie rod in penetrating oil. Break the jam nut loose. We don't want to move it too far, just enough that it's off the end of the tie rod. Using a 21mm socket and a breaker bar, crack the nut on the end of your tie rod loose. Once you get it loose enough, you may be able to finish removing it with a socket and ratchet. Now, if you're removing and replacing the outer tie rod, you can use a pickle fork here, which sits between the spindle and the ball joint and knocks it out as you tap the fork in. However, that damages the boot, rendering the old outer tie rod useless. So in the interest of saving parts, we're going to use a hammer and hit the side of the spindle where the taper of the ball joint end goes through and release it. Remove your tie rod and count the number of turns it takes to remove it. So it's just about 21 turns. We'll want to make sure we install the new tie rod end that same number of rotations. Now you'll notice that there's a hex cut on the end of your inner tie rod here, which is actually designed for a wrench to hold it. However, most open end wrenches are fairly weak, and with a really stuck nut like we have on the end of our inner tie rod here, it's going to be a lot safer and easier to grab it with a pair of vice grips and spin this off with a 24mm. We'll mark this flat with a paint marker. You could also mark it with a sharp chisel or punch, really anything that's just going to give you an indication of when it reaches the 12 o'clock position again. Be sure to keep the tie rod itself steady because this does pivot and can change the number of counts you have on that 12 o'clock position. 25, 26, 27, 28, just about 28. Using a pair of side cutters, remove the clamp from the end of the tie rod boot. Now you could also do this with a pair of pliers, but we're going to need the side cutters in the next step. And I like to use the minimum amount of tools possible. Cut the old clamp off the inner edge of the boot. Sometimes you got to work these ones a little bit to get them to break. And remove the boot from the rack. We're going to use a new boot clamp on the end of our boot. However, if you don't have one of these, that's okay. You can get away with using a hose clamp for it. Set the teeth in and engage. Slide it all back in. Slide that on. If you don't have a pair of cutters like this, which is what I use for the crimp tool, you can also get away with using an electrical crimper or a regular pair of side cutters. Just make sure you get on both sides of that fold and pinch it in. Get that as tight as you can without actually cutting into it. Make sure it stays secure. Since we showed you the side cutter method of removing this clamp, we'll show you the other method, which is using a regular pair of pliers or lineman's pliers, pinching all three tabs together. You'll feel where this locks onto the end of the bevel. Slide that clamp on there and just let it go. We're going to be replacing our old lock nut, so we'll take our new one and just put a mark on one of the flats so we can count the same number of turns back on. Ours was just over 28. It's not going to matter whether you're using the new one or the old one. We'll set that to about the 10 o'clock position, which is where mine came off. We'll count 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 28. Now what we'll do is it was about 21 turns to get our tie rod end on. And again, mine came off right around 9 or 10 o'clock. We'll go ahead and get that going again and count 21 turns back on. Line up the stud on the end of your new tie rod end and insert it into your spindle. Install your new nut. The new one is a 22 millimeter, so we'll tighten that on with a 22 millimeter socket and ratchet. Torque the outer tie rod nut to 63 foot-pounds. Your new jam nut is 22 millimeters if you installed one. Otherwise, you'll use a 24 millimeter wrench and tighten it back down all the way against the tie rod end. Don't forget to grease the fitting until your boot swells but does not break. Reinstall your wheel and tire. Get your 21 millimeter lug nuts as tight as you can by hand. Lower the partial weight of your vehicle back onto the tires. Torque your lug nuts to 110 foot-pounds in a cross pattern.
Thanks for watching. Visit us at 1AAuto.com for quality auto parts, fast and free shipping, and the best customer service in the industry.